Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. Mark and Sandra entered the bustling restaurant, looking around the room expectantly, eager to reunite with their families for a long-awaited dinner. As they entered, they noticed Paul and Lucy, Sandra's children, sitting in a quiet and secluded booth with Lizzie, Mark's daughter. Assuming that their spouses must have been out for a while or were late, they approached the table with smiles, unaware of the unexpected conversation that awaited them. Mark smoothly slid into the booth, pulled out a chair and made himself comfortable. Sandra followed suit, her eyes briefly scanning their surroundings before joining him, unfazed by the unusual circumstances. They took their seats, ready to enjoy the joyful evening together, completely unaware of the shocking revelation that was about to occur. Mark pulled out a chair and plopped down into the booth, greeting the group with a cheerful, "Hello, kids." Sandra, looking around the restaurant, followed suit and pulled out her own chair before asking, "Where are Jim and Sarah?" Paul intervened, explaining, "We asked them to give us some time alone with you." Sandra's smile grew wider. "Any important news? I think we should be flattered that you wanted to tell us first." Lizzie replied with a serious expression. "I think it was more because we wanted to share some things that we had learned." Mark, noticing the change in tone, asked worriedly, "You all speak so seriously. What's happening?" "Everything is fine." His gaze shifted to his daughter. Lizzie was silent. Lucy, seemingly unaffected by the seriousness of the conversation, casually remarked to Sandra, her mother, "Pineapple fudge." Sandra felt a lump form in her throat, rendering her momentarily speechless. Her face drained of color, turning as pale as a ghostly sheet as she struggled to comprehend the unfolding dialogue. Mark, completely bewildered by the sudden shift in tone, responded with a puzzled expression, his confusion evident in his voice. "Pineapple fudge? What are you talking about?" Lizzie, seizing the opportunity to clarify the situation, turned to her father with a leading question. "Good question, Dad." "Sandra, would you like to explain to him?" Lucy, Sandra's daughter, interjected once more, injecting a hint of sarcasm into her words. "Yes, Mom, would you care to enlighten my biological father about the significance of pineapple fudge?" Sandra, struggling with the shock of being faced with such a revelation, muttered, trying to collect her thoughts. Waiting. "How are you? Where did you hear about pineapple fudge?" Keeping a straight face, intervened, shedding light with a hint of accusation in his voice. "From your diaries, of course. Where do you write everything down, right? This is your secret code for. Today I had sex with a man who is not my husband, but is considered his best friend, isn't it?" His gaze shifted from his mother to Mark and back, his eyes reflecting indignation, not particularly hidden in his voice. Lucy, feeling the weight of this revelation, expressed a bittersweet feeling. "I always wanted to have an older sister." As she spoke, she quietly squeezed Paul's hand, which she held under the table. Her gaze moved to Lizzie, and she added with genuine tenderness, "And I knew and loved Lizzie all my life," also gently squeezing Lizzie's hand. But then her tone changed, filled with contempt, as she turned her attention to Mark. "But it's still a little shocking to hear that we have the same biological father." The weight of her words hung in the air, emphasizing the deep sense of betrayal and resentment she felt towards Mark and Sandra, whose actions had destroyed the foundation and trust of both families. Paul, with a mixture of annoyance and disappointment in his voice, told Mark the truth that had finally come out. "Did you really think that we would never know? In the world of DNA testing, genetic diseases, and ancestry research, it is clear that sooner or later this will come to light." Mark paused, the weight of Paul's words sinking in before he adopted a defensive stance. "Look, guys, we're really sorry you had to find out like this, but it shouldn't change anything," he asserted, though his attempt to reassure them felt feeble in the wake of shattered trust. As he continued to explain, Mark pleaded, "Lucy, Paul, I'm still the same Uncle Mark you've always known." However, his efforts to downplay the situation failed to acknowledge the profound impact of this revelation on their family dynamics. Before Mark could fully grasp the consequences, Jim's voice pierced the tension, startling both Mark and Sandra as they noticed their absent partners had quietly approached the table. "It's a little late for that, old friend. You're about 3 months late," Jim remarked, pulling out a chair and taking a seat. The weight of his words hung thick in the air, emphasizing the depth of betrayal. Sarah joined them at the table, her face showing anger and disappointment. "Besides, Jim found out first and told me before we jointly decided to tell the kids." She sat up, her movements filled with pent-up rage, her voice simmering with anger as she addressed Sandra directly. Sarah's words laced with sharp causticity. "And now, after our weekend with Jim, I really don't think no benefit is a good enough assessment." She grinned at Sandra. Sarah's face was a mixture of indignation and mockery. "Sandra, I can't understand what was going on in your unfortunate head. Have you traded your Michelin-starred chocolate ganache for a stale, dried-out piece of pineapple fudge? I'm glad the kids insisted on extra time because I could barely walk here from our hotel room." Mark's shock quickly turned to anger as he realized the truth. His voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and indignation. Wait, you and Jim, are you having an affair? Lucy, although angry, could not help but laugh bitterly at the irony of Mark's reaction. Are you really upset about this? Aren't you being too hypocritical? There was slight sarcasm in her words, emphasizing double standards. Who was gradually regaining her composure, intervened in a calm but decisive tone. Wait, if you two were together, then we're even. Jim, you got your revenge. She met the accusing glances of her children and husband. Now we have to figure out how to move forward and work on rebuilding both of our families. There was a glimmer of determination in her eyes as she took on the role of leader. Sandra's voice grew stronger as she continued, determination guiding her words. This shouldn't change anything. Mark and I will end our affair, and you will both end yours. We can all get through this. There was a resolute determination in those words, as if Sandra was steadfastly committed to paving a path toward healing and restoration despite the shattered trust. Jim's eyes flashed with a mix of shock and intense anger as he absorbed Sandra's attempt to level the playing field. His voice dripped with bitterness as he retorted, "Well, that may seem fair to some, my dear. It would be if it weren't utterly idiotic." He paused, the simmering anger spilling out in a torrent of pain from betrayal. You've been having an affair with this scumbag for 20 years. You conceived a child together and led me to believe he was mine. All this time, Sarah and I were friends, close friends, but we never crossed any lines. How the hell does that make us equal? Sandra's confusion was evident when she replied. Sarah just said that you spent the weekend together. Sarah's mocking tone cut through the air as she retorted, "We did it and it was magical. Honey, it turns out that at our age, not all guys suck so much." She grinned, clearly enjoying the opportunity to tease her husband. Lucy chimed in, playfully interjecting, "Heave, Mom." If Sandra had been in a more stable frame of mind, she would have noticed that her daughter called the other woman Mom, but in her confusion she did not notice it. She'll figure it out soon enough. Jim's voice grew firmer as he continued, a hint of triumph in his words. But you're wrong, Sandra. We never had an affair. Because by the time I touched Sarah intimately for the first time, we had both already filed official divorce papers. You were too busy on your weekend business trip for us to bother serving you. But he raised his hand, pointing to the man standing at the door. The atmosphere became tense. The unknown man reacted to Jim's gesture and approached the table. He wasted no time in conveying his message in a cool and formal voice. Sandra Davis, Mark Willis, you've been served. He handed each of them a brown manila envelope, the contents of which were no secret. The man then stepped back, taking out his camera to capture the moment before nodding to Jim and walking away, leaving the culprits dazed and confused. The table fell silent as Mark and Sandra exchanged glances, frantically trying to comprehend the sudden turn of events. The weight of these envelopes completely changed their lives, adding another layer of uncertainty to a turbulent situation. Sandra's composure shook. Her voice trembled with despair, and tears streamed down her face. I don't want a divorce. This is not the way it should have happened. Mark and I don't like each other. That didn't mean anything. I love you, Jim. I have only ever loved you, she pleaded with her husband, her words heavy with anguish, desperately hoping to salvage their fractured relationship. Sandra glanced from Jim to Lucy and Paul, her heart wrenching as she spoke to her children, her voice cracking with emotion. Lucy, Paul, please, tell him. Tell your father that this doesn't have to tear our family apart. Her plea was directed at her children, yearning for them to help mend the rift between their parents. Meanwhile, Mark sat in silence, utterly shattered, his face reflecting the immense pain he bore. He appeared lost, grappling with the weight of his remorse and regret, unable to articulate the depth of his feelings. In a silent gesture of solidarity and support, Jim, Sarah, Paul, Lucy, and Lizzie reached out, placing their hands on the table and intertwining their fingers. Their united front emphasized their commitment to each other, acknowledging the obstacles ahead and drawing strength from each other to face the uncertain future together. Jim's stern voice carried through the room, drawing attention and signaling that it was time for Sandra to listen. The weight of the decision made by all five was obvious. Sandra, I think it's time for you to shut up and listen. The five of us have been discussing how to proceed for a month now. We've got all our ducks in a row, and as far as I'm concerned, none of this is subject to revision. Lizzie intervened in a decisive tone, confirming the unity of their decision. We thought long and hard about it separately, and then we leaned on each other to decide how to proceed. We are unanimous on this. She glanced at Paul and Lucy, appreciating their collective efforts. I'll just add that the three of us came up with this and your spouses initially tried to dissuade us. Paul, speaking with a sense of maturity and determination, emphasized the gravity of the situation. My little sister may be the youngest at the table, but she's an adult now and has a wise head on her shoulders. She was directly affected by this, so we asked her to tell you how things will unfold. Lucy, sniffling but gathering her strength, spoke with a mixture of pain and determination. In short, it is so. She turned to Mark, her voice firm and unyielding. Mark, you provided your seed, but you never were and never will be my father. Her gaze returned to Sandra, her expression hardening. Sandra, you have been my mother all my life. Not as good a mother as my father was, but still my mother. Well, it ends tonight. From now on, you and I have no relationship. I don't want to talk to you, read your messages, or have any contact at all. This may change in the future, but I wouldn't bet on it. If this happens, it will be my decision. I'm sure you're against it, but I want none of you to ever contact me again. I can assure you that I will not respond. Paul, looking at his broken and almost catatonic mother, shared Lucy's feelings. The same applies to me. Lizzie, resolute and unwavering, reinforced her stance. And me as well, she asserted firmly. Sarah, composed yet determined, addressed the practical aspect of their decision. Jim and I have retained a joint lawyer, whose contact information is provided in the envelopes you're holding, she explained calmly. All communication from now on must go through legal counsel. A heavy silence enveloped the table as the weight of their words settled in. The path ahead had been set, and the ramifications of their decisions were bound to reshape their lives. Jim, after a significant pause, allowed the silence to linger, allowing Sandra and Mark to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. Breaking the quietude, he proceeded to the next matter at hand. We've already informed all 8 grandparents about this today. He turned his gaze to Sandra. Your parents, he nodded, and yours, pointing to Mark, didn't do anything wrong. And we don't want to erase them from the lives of their grandchildren. His words conveyed concern and attentiveness, as he always respected and loved his relatives. Jim continued, emphasizing all the conditions. However, their continued participation depends on whether they accept this situation. They must not pass on any messages from you to the children and will not give you updates on any aspect of our lives. He made it clear that the boundaries he set for Sandra and Mark also applied to their parents. While they may maintain a relationship with you, this should in no way interfere with us or affect our family dynamics. Mark, your mom and dad are really excited to get to know their new granddaughter, and we will definitely support Lucy in getting to know them. At the same time, it is not surprising that this does not change anything for my parents. They love Lucy more than anything in the world, and nothing will ever change that. The once unified family structure has been forever changed, and the new boundaries will change the relationship not only between Sandra, Mark, and the children, but also between their parents and grandchildren. Sarah entered. We're not leaving. This is not New York or Los Angeles. We may run into each other in a restaurant or on the street. Her tone was filled with anger, a sense of warning, and a clear boundary. With palpable restraint, Sarah continued, determination evident in her voice. I would strongly advise both of you to pretend that you don't know me. It took all my self-control not to spank you both here tonight. The depth of her anger was obvious, and it was clear that maintaining composure in future confrontations might prove difficult. Then Lizzie's voice took on a more positive, albeit forced tone, and it was her turn. But in a way, Sandra, you were right. Her words hung in the air, attracting the attention of everyone at the table. A noticeable shift occurred when Lizzie addressed Aunt Sandra, abandoning her usual term of endearment and simply calling her Sandra. It was a subtle but significant sign of strained relations. She paused briefly before delivering the unexpected news, her tone still laced with a mixture of emotions. I want to share good news, actually 2 good news. Paul and I are getting married, and it will happen soon. Because in about 7 months your first grandchild will join us. Sandra's initial joy at the news was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the weight of the preceding conversation. Similarly, Mark's hopeful expression dimmed as he grappled with the complex implications of their situation. Paul, dispelling any semblance of positivity, spoke with blunt honesty, his voice tinged with disappointment and determination. Lizzie and I discussed how your betrayal impacted our relationship. He began, his tone firm. It's bizarre to discover we now share a half-sister, but from the moment we met at playgroup, we've been inseparable. Though bitterness laced his words, there was an underlying resolve not to let their parents' actions fracture their bond. While the circumstances of our meeting will always be tainted by your actions, Lizzie added, there's no reason for it to tarnish our relationship. The arrival of this child may have been unexpected and earlier than planned, but we've always wanted to start a family. There was a sincerity in her words reflecting a deep desire for stability and love in the midst of chaos. Her voice grew stronger. Our parents, the 2 that remain, are very supportive of our decision to start a family now. Lizzie highlighted the support they received from Jim and Sarah, who were by their side during this crucial moment. Their parents' unwavering support provided a glimmer of hope amidst all the turmoil, a reminder that there are still foundations of love and caring to rely on. But no matter what you may think about how things will change in the future, know this, Paul stated in an unwavering tone. You will not attend our wedding. You will not be present at the birth of your first grandchild or any subsequent ones. You won't spoil them, play with them, or babysit them to give us a day off. His words painted a picture of several restrictions. He looked at Sandra, a mixture of emotions showing on his face, before continuing. You won't get their photos, hear their first words, or catch them when they fall. The weight of these words was palpable, illustrating the deep loss both sides would feel. He looked at Jim, and gratitude and respect flashed in his eyes. "Mom," he turned to Sarah, trying a new way of addressing her for the first time. The barely noticeable change in address carried a deep meaning, signaling a change in their relationship. Paul's voice softened as he realized the burden that would now fall on Jim and Sarah. Mom and Dad will have to take on the burden of being the only grandparents. Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the thought of becoming a grandmother and at the fact that Paul called her mom. Having dealt the final blow, Paul turned to Mark. "Mark, you won't take Lizzie to the altar. That honor will go to Dad. Frankly, you've already given up your right to give it away." There was a strong determination in Jim's voice as he raised the issue of making these changes widely known. "Sarah and I didn't do anything wrong, and therefore we do not intend to hide the reasons for the breakdown of our marriages from friends and acquaintances," Lucy continued, barely audible. I want people to know why I completely cut you out of my life, Mom, so you can be judged harshly and not me." Her insistence on the gravity of the decision reflected her longing for validation and acknowledgement. "I prefer you not to attend my graduation next month," Lucy stated firmly, her voice tinged with determination and concern for her reputation. "While I understand it's a public event, I've worked hard to earn the respect of my teachers and my friends' parents. I don't want to risk tarnishing that by reacting negatively if you're there." Lizzie added a touch of levity to the tense atmosphere with a wry smile. "Unless, of course, Mom hasn't given you a makeover by then," she joked, hinting at potential serious consequences if Mark and Sandra disregarded their wishes. With that, all five of them stood up, leaving Sandra and Mark alone to confront the shattered reality of their world. And lastly, Jim began decisively, his gaze focused on his cheating ex-spouses. "I had a loving friendship with Sarah for 20 years. It won't take much effort to turn this into a loving relationship." He pointed to Sarah, acknowledging the depth of their connection. "I've already fallen in love with her, just because of her support over the past 3 months." He looked straight at Sandra and Mark. "Betrayal won't break me, and I won't let it break Sarah." There was a decisive challenge in his words, a refusal to give in to the pain he was causing. "You may have been laughing at us behind our backs for the last 20 years, but for the next 50 I'll be laughing with Sarah." He spoke of the joy and freedom that awaited him and Sarah, unburdened by the weight of a failed relationship. Turning to Sarah, Jim's tone softened. "Sarah, I've fallen deeply in love with you. I understand if it's too soon for you to feel the same, but I ask for your patience and the chance to build something meaningful together." There was a plea in his words, a request for understanding and the opportunity to create a new chapter together. "And when you're ready," Jim continued, his voice gaining strength, "I want us to pledge our future to each other before God and our children. While our previous partners may not have taken their vows seriously, we will honor ours with the depth and sincerity they deserve." Jim acknowledged that Sarah might not yet share the same level of affection, but he hoped that with time, their bond would deepen and flourish. But looking at her tear-stained smile, it was obvious to anyone that by this time she already felt the same way. Jim and Sarah hugged each other and followed their 3 children out, united and ready to forge a new path together, driven by love and determination to find happiness among the ruins. Sandra and Mark were left to deal with the consequences of their actions. Second story, so to make a really long story not so long but to give some insight. My boyfriend and myself have been together only a little over a year. So we had been going through it a lot going into Christmas, and it was supposed to be our anniversary, and I had planned a trip and everything. Day after Christmas, he gets all drunk and starts yelling not nice things at me and about me while my 2 daughters are home. He lived with his parents before, so go home. Get out right. I overreacted and tried to apologize and told him how badly we needed that time together and that trip and to get away and just be together. He absolutely refused to go, and we didn't speak for a few days. We were supposed to leave the 28th and be in Florida for the new year. Fast forward to a few days after New Year's, and we were still text arguing and whatnot, but not seeing each other and saying it's over all that. We end up getting together and talking and having sex and everything. Then I checked his phone and discovered that he had been soliciting prostitutes for a specific fetish. Additionally, I found out he had been struggling with a Percocet addiction and drinking excessively every day. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed any of this before. Despite this, I stupidly decided to give him another chance because he promised he would change. Fast forward to the present. I've been insisting that he needs to be more considerate of my feelings because our arguments always revolve around the same issues. I'm still trying to come to terms with the fact that he betrayed our relationship. I apologize for bringing it up again, but it's still a sore point for me. During the weekend of the 16th, we were arguing a lot and didn't communicate much. My birthday was on the 21st, so he came over to my house on the night of the 20th to give me my presents and spend time with me. We made plans for the weekend and everything seemed fine. Fast forward to Friday the 23rd, and we had a wonderful date night. We made up, had great sex, and everything seemed to be back on track. However, the next morning, I couldn't resist the urge to check his phone again. There is a video of him getting bent over a couch by a woman with a strap on ... on the fucking 18th man. Roundabout, I won't peg him. I don't want to. I don't like it. I'm not into it. It's not me. I'll do other things in that area. Not that. That's my boundary. Sue, I guess I need help processing. He says he never told me this fetish because he didn't want me to judge him. He told me he just wanted to do that again. Because he had in his life before me. So why wouldn't he disclose that when we started dating? We wouldn't have fallen in love. I'd have told him I am not the one for him and we could be friends. Why did he do this knowing he can't go without it? And why does he still insist to this very minute he can and it was just a mistake? I need help. I hate what he's done to us. I have no trust in him and now I truly don't feel like he loves me or even wants me fully. What the fuck do I do? I know the general answer is leave his ass because he's a liar. But honestly, I need help processing all of this before I can make a decision. And I have nowhere else to go but here because I'm embarrassed. Help. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.